Doing intense workouts every single day doesn't make women stronger. It often makes their hormones more disrupted. I'm Elisa Vitti, the pioneer of cycle syncing and women's hormone expert, and here's what nonstop HIIT is really doing to your cycle.
So really, if we're going to be thinking about a new biohack for women, it should be that you start strength training as a teenager. You don't have to lift heavy, but any kind of strength training, even body weight strength training, is so beneficial versus long form cardio classes and hip hop for an hour and boot camp and cycling and spinning and all of these things that put an enormous drain on our glucose resources, jack up our cortisol, increase stress response in the body, disrupt progesterone production, and put us in the place, depending on where we are in our cycle, at a real disadvantage. So don't be doing the same workouts every day. Definitely focus more on strength training.
I've spent years helping women understand their hormones, and one of the most powerful shifts I've seen is what happens when you start working with your cycle instead of against it. It's not just about fewer symptoms, it's about feeling more like yourself again, more steady, more energized, more at home in your body. We studied cycle syncing, and 92% of women had less PMS in just 60 days. If you're curious, you can try it for free. Just download the MyFlow app on iTunes or Google Play and use the code FREEMONTH.
I just want to start by saying thank you so much for being here. Launching this podcast has been such an exciting journey and a dream of mine for a long time. And the fact that you've tuned in again means so much to me. So thank you. My mission with the Ovary Club is to help us all and give you the clarity and understanding of how your biology works through this hormonal lens. And so that you can really know how to take care of yourself and play the long game and get all the vitality and energy and juiciness that you deserve as a woman. And knowing that you're here for that conversation fills me with so much hope and gratitude that we can all be living more vital, vibrant lives as women. Today, I want to have a real conversation about biohacking. It's everywhere. It's podcasts, social, wellness circles, events. And while the idea of hacking your biology sounds exciting, and there's definitely some benefit to it, there is a little huge problem with it, which is that most of the research that's been done on these interventions and protocols have been done on men. And they're also the ones that are popularized are all kind of focused on optimizing male biology. Male biology, there's a problem with this because male biology runs on a 24-hour clock. And women's biology in our reproductive years runs on this infradian rhythm, which is a 28-day cycle. And this impacts, as I broke down in my second book, when I broke ground on this conversation in the book, In the Flow, on the infradian rhythm, and where I sort of outlined the cycle syncing method, this issue of trying to take care of our bodies in the ecosystem that optimizes male biology just doesn't work, right? We need to be seeing that we have to really align with the fact that our 28-day cycle affects our metabolism, our mood, our, how many calories we need in different phases of the cycle. And it changes. We can't do the same things day in and day out to optimize our health. So when you take a hack that was designed to optimize male biology and you apply it to the female ecosystem, the results aren't always the same or even empowering. In fact, oftentimes, you'll see that they work against you, disrupting your hormones, dysregulating other systems of the body. And this can leave you more drained, feeling frustrated. And I know so many of you in the wellness conversation, especially as women, want to do it right. You want to be healthy. You want to be optimized. So you're trying really hard, but it's adding to your stress and it's leaving you more frustrated than what you were when you got started. So in this episode, I am going to unpack the 5 most common biohacks that don't actually serve women's hormones, why they miss the mark, and how you can think about biohacking in a brand new way. In fact, I have a new term to introduce for you as women that takes biohacking in a different direction, that's female specific, that I want to invite you to start using, that's more aligned and tailored to your unique biology. By the end of this episode, I hope that you feel more clear about what's worth doing, what's not worth doing from this biohacking perspective, and how to start syncing with your hormones instead of fighting with them. All right. So let's start with biohack number one, which is like the most popular in the longevity conversation, and it's fasting. I mean, any kind of fasting, intermittent fasting, extended fasting, water fasting. I mean, just like fasting is everybody's favorite hack. And listen, there's a lot of research that clearly indicates that fasting has tremendous benefits on longevity, on cellular aging, on autophagy in the cells. Like we know that it does wonderful things for the body. It helps with insulin regulation and reduces inflammation. The challenge is that this research was done on men and postmenopausal women. Postmenopausal women's ecosystems much more closely resemble that of male ecosystems. Why? Because after our last period, when we stop cycling, we go back to a circadian only ecosystem like we were when we were children, right? It's that 4 decades in the middle when you're cycling that you have both a circadian and an infradian rhythm where these male oriented biohacks can be problematic. So, what happens when you're fasting during your reproductive years? Well, let's just take skipping breakfast, which is like the popular way to intermittently fast, right? You just don't eat breakfast. You don't eat your first meal of the day till like noon or 1 o'clock or something to that effect. This definitely is going to cause a rise in cortisol, right? Why? Because without any glucose, you need to get some form of sugar to the brain, the heart, and the muscle tissue for you to function during the day. And without you adding that in dietarily through breaking the fast in the morning after you've already had what is considered the golden fast overnight, you then force your body to recruit stored glucose from your fat cells through the mechanism of cortisol activating those glucose stores and circulating them into the bloodstream. This elevation in cortisol once in a while is no problem for your body. But as a woman, chronic elevation of cortisol is a form of stress. Now, if you listen to episode 1, you know that that's definitely going to be communicated back to your ovary. And short term, it's okay. But when it's long term, you know that that's going to be a problem from a hormonal aging perspective. But in addition, now we're talking about elevated cortisol starting to have impact on your progesterone production. So you can be intermittent fasting and thinking you're doing something beneficial for yourself, but you're now feeling more stressed, more anxious. And then you get to your next luteal phase and your PMS is off the charts, right? You have more symptoms than you had before. Why? You're not making as much progesterone as you should because of this fasting situation. So definitely this is a problem just holistically from a cycle perspective. But then when you add in which cycle phase you're in, right? Fasting is even more nuanced in terms of its problematic nature for women in their reproductive years. So you can tolerate a slightly longer fast in the first half of your cycle, which is the week after your bleed leading up to ovulation. So we're talking about 10 to 14 days after the last day of your bleed. You can tolerate a little bit more. What do I mean by that? Maybe you don't eat the first 90 minutes after you wake up. That's it. That's the extent to which you could delay your breakfast. In the luteal phase, after ovulation, remember, based on what I shared about in the second book, In the Flow, we know that our metabolism speeds up in the second half of the cycle. So you need more calories and you need to make sure that you're protecting your blood sugar. So you have to eat right away when you wake up and you have to eat a little bit more frequently throughout the day to keep that blood sugar stable throughout the day to protect cortisol balance and progesterone production, to reduce anxiety and mood swings and all of the symptoms that we think are normal. It's really sometimes just down to mismanaging our blood sugar. So the fasting window for women has to be, you have to think about where you are in your cycle. You could do a little bit more in the first half, but none at all in the second half. And what about bleeding? I mean, take it, individually. I think you want to everyone feels the slowdown in their metabolism as their bleed starts. You just feel a little bit less your digestive fire slows down. But think about something nourishing and warming, and maybe you're doing a collagen bone broth in the morning, something. But fasting, pretty much anytime after ovulation is going to be something you don't respond well to. What fasting window do I recommend? The golden fast. What is the golden fast? This is beneficial for everyone. So that's that 12-hour fast that's overnight. So from dinner to breakfast, right? So you have to decide what your last meal of the day is. Now, a lot of male biohackers are pretty adamant about being complete with ingesting food by 6 p.m. That's a really smart idea, one you should consider, because you then give your body adequate time to process any carbohydrates and glucose that you've consumed at that meal, to prepare yourself optimally to fall asleep at the right window, which is about 10 p.m., so that you can get maximum sleep and make all the melatonin and protect your circadian clock and all of that, right? That's a really good thing to do. And then, depending on when you wake up, you may find that you are ready to eat right away, especially let's say you're lifting, you're doing your early morning workouts. I mean, on lifting days, I know I wake up, I'm like starving, ready to eat breakfast after that 12-hour fast. So anywhere from like 12 to 13 hours is a safe fast for any woman to do in her reproductive years. And again, it's that dinner to breakfast window. I recommend that you try to eat breakfast within 90 minutes of being awake, something. And ideally, you would kickstart the day with something like 30 grams of protein, a little bit of carbohydrate, even if it's just 20 to 30 grams, and a good amount of fat, like 12 grams of fat. This nice spread of macronutrients is going to keep your blood sugar stable from the first meal. And that first meal makes a huge impact on how your blood sugar is going to respond the rest of the day. So if you get breakfast time and type right, you can have much smoother sailing with your blood sugar throughout the whole day. And that's totally worth your biohacking that. But fasting, just for the sake of, trying to eat less calories or, I don't know, manipulate your weight, usually backfires. I have found, and again, I've been somebody who's been extremely obese, 3 different times, once with my PCOS and 2 times postpartum. All 3 times I was 210 pounds. Having lost that weight 3 times, I will tell you it is definitely not from excessive calorie restriction. It's about balancing blood sugar and moving my body and living in sync with my cycle.
If you've ever wanted to ask me your own hormone questions, the Ovary Club Insiders is where you can do that. You'll get access to private podcast episodes where I answer real member questions with clear, science-backed guidance you can actually use. Join us at alisavidi.com/insiders.
Okay, second biohack is this sort of low-carb ketogenic diet. And while I think some of the research that's out around women with PCOS having some benefit from a ketogenic diet around improving insulin um, sensitivity, it's not really a great long-term strategy because women with PCOS also tend to struggle more with fatty liver. And, living on a diet that has zero carbohydrates and you're basically eating just very like high fat foods to keep you, satiated from a hunger perspective, it's not optimal and it's not balanced. It's not really sustainable long term. For women who don't have PCOS, right, this is where it gets even more problematic. Studies show that women who use ketogenic diets actually increase their LDL, that's the bad cholesterol, over time, even after just 4 weeks. And of course, because it's the type of fat, saturated fat and animal proteins, that's going to really elevate your bad cholesterol. So if you're going to do a ketogenic diet, you have to use be very sensitive and intentional about which fats you're taking in. And you have to check your levels to see how your body's responding. You may be a super absorber of saturated fats from a genetic inheritance perspective, and this could be something that's really problematic for you. The other thing that keto does is it creates a stress response in the body by restricting a whole food group, a nutrient type, switching from carbs to fat for energy. Is an adaptive form of stress. And if you're already depleted, if you're coming into this with hormonal problems, if you're having PMS, if you're having fertility issues, if you're aging hormonally faster than you should be, this might exacerbate your issues. It also is going to potentially rob you of micronutrients that you can only get from healthy carbohydrates. It may also reduce your exposure to dietary sources of fiber, and that's going to put a strain on your estrogen metabolism. Remember, your liver breaks down estrogen, but then it packages it for elimination through the bowel. And you need to have soluble and insoluble fiber present in the large intestine to excrete that out in your bowel movement. So if you don't, because you're in this sort of ketogenic diet, you may find that it's not helping. And you may find that you get more acne, more breast tenderness, more cycle symptoms, heavier periods, longer bleeding, all of that from switching the diet that way. Um, and then, I think the main issue that I have is the impact on hormones, right? Like I said, it's definitely going to impact estrogen balance, but it's definitely going to jack up cortisol levels. I don't think that's really beneficial to us in the long term from an ovarian perspective. Um, and again, there are some keto has been shown to have some negative impact on fertility, on perimenopause. So again, I think for women, this is not the optimal diet for us. We need a less is more approach, extreme things. We don't need so much extreme hacking into our system. Our ecosystem is really just elegantly, beautifully designed to do so much with some just basic good inputs. You can get a lot without having to kind of go to extreme with your diet. Biohack number 3, just to keep things moving, is cold plunging. I wanted to talk about that because, it's very popular in the biohacking conversation, and how cold and how often and all of that. And I just want to break down the simple science, which is that for women, less time in the cold is better than men. Because what cold plunging does is it helps activate sort of this brown fat in our bodies. It helps us become a little bit more metabolically active. It can help with weight loss. It has a lot of benefits. Um, but for women, we don't have to go to the extremes that men have to go to get the same results. And this is kind of the narrative that I want you to be thinking of when you think about biohacking is you don't have to push your system as hard as men do to get the same results. Cold plunging is a great example of that. So men need to be in like 4 degrees Celsius water. You only need to be in like 15 to 20 degrees Celsius water to get the same results. That's about 59 degrees. What does that really equate to? That's like turning the hot water off in your shower and just letting the cold water kind of, you know, spray on you for a minute. And that's the other thing. Men have to plunge for longer. You only need about a minute exposure. So that's the first thing. It's less cold and less time and less frequent. That's the third in general. So you're talking twice a week to get the benefits that men do from more exposure. But you also need to be factoring in where you are in your cycle. So if you're cycling, you can definitely cold plunge follicular and ovulatory phases. You can see how you do with it in the luteal phase. First half of the luteal phase, you should be fine. PMS phase, you may want to hold off on that. The body's starting to cool off as estrogen and progesterone decrease in serum concentration in the bloodstream. And then during menstruation, not at all, because you are actually colder temperature wise, and you don't need to do that. Also, just think about it yourself. When you're bleeding, do you want to be submerged in a cold bath? No, you want things that are warm. And there's a reason for that, right? And that all has to do with some traditional Chinese medicine theory that we don't want to get into right now. But what I will say is follow your intuition around exposure to cold. Now, there is some interesting research around cold plunging and menopause that I do think is really interesting, which is that there have been some studies that show that some of this regular cold exposure, again, the same, doesn't have to be as cold or as frequent, like that cold rinse in the morning, that vasoconstriction has been shown to really help with hot flashes. So if that's something that you're struggling with, you can hop in a cold shower, and that might help alleviate your symptoms um, without having to think about getting on medications, which there are for hot flashes, but we could use cold plunging. Okay, so for cold plunging, less is more and less cold, and pay attention to where you are in your cycle. Okay, Biohack number 4. HIIT workouts every day. You know, this whole idea of doing the same intensity cardio kind of focused workouts every day. I wrote about this extensively and in the flow. If you have the MyFlow app, you know that you're not doing the same workout every phase of your cycle. This is not good for your female hormonal cycle. And even if you're postmenopausal, this is not the optimal way to work out, right? We know that we need some HIIT exposure, but we need less than men, right? So, in fact, what we're learning is that the narrative that was being put out there in the wellness conversation was, well, we're not researching women, but they're probably just smaller versions of men with a more sluggish metabolism. So whatever we're recommending for men, let's just have women do more calorie restriction, more cardio, more whatever. And it's really so flawed. That whole line of reasoning just actually doesn't add up when we look at the research. So for women, with this much HIIT workout, what we're missing is all the strength training we need to both improve our insulin response, improve our metabolic strength, build lean muscle that keeps that positive, virtuous circle of our metabolic strength and flexibility going, improves insulin sensitivity, helps manage weight, helps with glucose response, helps with hormonal health, right? Strength training is really the foundation. If I could take a time machine back, I would have told 16-year-old Elisa to start strength training. The amount of time I wasted on cardio, I wish I could go back and undo. If you look at somebody who was a high school athlete as a female and you compare them to someone like myself who is not a high school athlete, their body composition at the same future time in their 40s compared to somebody who did not start strength training in their teens is dramatically different because you build your max capacity of muscle up until the age of 35 and you have all this muscle memory so it stays with you. So really, if we're going to be thinking about a new biohack for women, it should be that you start strength training as a teenager. You don't have to lift heavy, but any kind of strength training, even body weight strength training, is so beneficial versus long form cardio classes and, hip hop for an hour and boot camp and cycling and spinning and all of these things that put an enormous drain on our glucose resources, jack up our cortisol, increase stress response in the body, disrupt progesterone production, and put us in the place, depending on where we are in our cycle, at a real disadvantage. So don't be doing the same workouts every day. Definitely focus more on strength training. Get in your steps for sure. Do some sprint interval training twice a week, run up a hill at max speed, like for 10, 20 seconds and take a break and do it again. Do like 4 rounds of that to train your heart, right? Because that's what cardiovascular is meant to do, to train the heart muscle. But the rest of the time, just train your other muscles. I mean, when I'm lifting and I'm doing my heavy squats where I'm like squatting 100 pounds, like, you know, my heart is pumping like I had just ran a mile. So you don't need to do cardio the way you think you do when you start introducing strength training. The last biohack that I really am so excited to unpack is this whole idea of like the power morning, like the wake up early and, wake up at 5 a.m., like have a matcha, have a coffee, go to the gym, like, you're crushing your mornings, you're somehow doing all this biohacking first thing in the morning, you're cold plunging, you're hot saunaing, you're whatever you're doing, and you're doing all of this extreme routine first thing in the morning. First of all, let's just talk about the pressure and stress of the idea of this like perfect morning. Now, I'm all for a nice daily routine that supports your circadian rhythm and your blood sugar stability. But this idea of waking up early, we know doesn't suit women the same way that it suits men, right? I wrote about this also in the Flow. Women have more densely networked brains compared to men. I think that's a benefit. But what that means is that we need 20 to 30 more minutes of sleep. So whereas if you're in a partnership with a man, if he wants to set his alarm for 5 a.m., good for him. Please don't let him wake you up at the same time, because even if you wanted to wake up early, 5:30 would still need to be your wake up time. And that doesn't even factor in where you are in your cycle, because if you are in the luteal phase, we know we need even more sleep than the extra 30 minutes. We need like more like an 60 to 90 more minutes of sleep in the second half of the cycle. So I don't like a rigid morning routine. People ask me this all the time in the media, what's your morning routine? I just like to get up, you know, around depending on where I'm in my cycle, anywhere from 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning. And then I don't jump into stressing my adrenals. I don't get up and have caffeine on an empty stomach. I don't get right into movement. I try to do what I can to keep my cortisol low so I don't look at my phone. I do what I call kind of like a yummy morning. I don't do a power morning. I do a soft, yummy morning. I stretch, I hug myself. I try to do a little gratitude, just scan my body, see how I'm feeling. I try to start the day in the most gentle and loving way that I can so that my body does not go into fight or flight mode, right? Because if it does, and I have done that, we all do, we have to get up early for a flight or a work presentation or something. The rest of the day, you're just running on that kind of adrenaline and it's no good for your hormones. So a gentle morning. And yes, I have kids. I got to get them up for school. I got to make sure they have what they need, do their breakfast, get them out the door on time. But I still start the day in this gentle way. And I do eat breakfast, a nice meal, my 30 grams of protein, 30 grams of carbs, 12 grams of fat. Like I start the day in a gentle way. And then at some point, depending on where I'm in my cycle, I might do my lifts in the morning, first half of the cycle. In my luteal phase, I'll probably do my lifts between lunch and 3 p.m., just so that I kind of, again, keep things as gentle as I can. The point is adapting your routine to what is going to reduce your stress level is so critical for women. Why? Stress ages the hormones and the ovaries faster than anything else. So even though it's great for guys to wake up early to take advantage of their early morning testosterone jolt, we don't have that. We shouldn't be trying to be good girls who wake up super early in the morning to quote unquote have the most successful life. I do a lot. I have kids, I have a business, I write books, I'm doing this podcast, I lift, I meal prep, I do a lot. I just don't do this early morning madness. And I also find that there's a little bit of concern that I'm having with like women in the biohacking conversation who yet to have any children are talking about, these optimal morning routines. And I'm just thinking to myself, if you put a kid in this morning routine, it kind of doesn't work. And that's a slippery slope. What are we saying if we're saying there's one right way to do a morning that doesn't include a woman's reality, that it's a liability to be female? I think it's dangerous. And I think that's what's fundamentally so problematic with a male-oriented biohacking conversation in general is that it doesn't include our reality. It makes us feel subconsciously like we got the short end of the biological stick, which we do not and did not get. And we constantly try to fit ourselves into a model of a lifestyle that has nothing to do with our reality. And that's can be damaging from a hormonal perspective. If I don't like these biohacks, what's like the new solution? If I don't even like this idea of biohacking, I want to put a new term out to you. Because I also just don't even like the idea of like hacking. I don't want to be hacked into. I want something that feels softer and more feminine. So I've come up with this other word that I hope you might want to kind of adopt and help us popularize as the female alternative to biohacking. And that is bioharmonizing, right? I I think that we need something that fits a feminine definition and something that matches our ecosystem because we as women, we need a new pathway that includes us. We don't need these extreme biohacks, comparatively speaking, to men. We have an ecosystem that works really well when we give it, like I was talking about in episode 1, the right inputs over time. So we don't need more extreme hacks. We just need to do the right things for longer. And we need this idea of bioharmony, working with what's already working in our body and not waiting until there's a crisis to do all of this extreme hacking. And given the recent research indicating that our gender differences are real and do need to be considered in all of these conversations around wellness. Women specifically, I think, need this concept of bioharmonizing now more than ever. And if I kind of zoom out of my books and all my work for the past 25 years, I really think that all I've been really talking about is this idea of bioharmonizing for all of this time. Like, here's how your system works, and here's how to work with it. And if you do that, everything flows, everything is optimized. You don't have to add things in from the outside that don't normally exist in the body to get it to do what it should do. The body has everything it needs. You just have to kind of manage those inputs. And that's why women who come and work with me at Flow Living and have gotten the results that they've gotten, and why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling again at this stage of life, because you can bioharmonize and it's easier. There's less on your wellness to-do list. So, you don't have to spend as much money. So there you have it. Just a little quick recap. The 5 biohacks that I personally don't recommend for women because they disrupt hormones are the overuse of fasting, because they spike cortisol, they slow down your thyroid function, they disrupt your menstrual cycle, and they leave women more stressed than supported. Low carb diets. It might work briefly. It might be okay for PCOS short term, but long term, it eventually drains your energy, impacts your fertility, and throws your mood and hormones off balance. Cold plunges, while they're trendy, this can overload your stress response and be very disruptive in the second half of the cycle. So if you're going to do it less frequently, less cold, and for less time. HIIT workouts every day. Definitely not. Daily intense cardio pushes your body into that irregular cycle, stress response, overtraining, second half of the cycle, not worth it. And power mornings, rigid 5 a.m. routines that ignore your infradian rhythm and add unnecessary psychological and hormonal stress. It's unsustainable, it's counterproductive, and it just leaves you feeling bad about yourself as a woman. And I'm just not here for that. Okay, big takeaway. Most of these trends were built on male biology. And when women try to force themselves to adopt these practices, it can leave us feeling worse instead of feeling better. If this episode helped you to rethink how you approach your health, your biohacking journey, make sure you hit follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you won't miss another episode. While you're there, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you thought. And it'll, of course, help more women discover the show. And I want more of us to be syncing with our hormones and not fighting with them. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't wait to see you back for episode 3. We're going to continue this journey from feeling confused with your hormones to feeling confident and vital. See you next time.